Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of The Critics. It's a show about how we can use data and insights to create better leadership. And I've got some really special guests here with me today. Sherry Spencer Bachman, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Vinay.
Good. And just want to do a sound check. Can you hear me okay, Sherry, and everybody else?
Yep.
Good. Carl Braun, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Vinay. Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me here today. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And Michael, not last but not least. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm wonderful. Thank you, Vinay. Pleasure meeting you, Sherry and Carl. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we're on the panel here on our discussion today is there's this topic that's been floating around the industry a lot, I think a lot recently, this concept of diversity. So we titled this podcast or this panel discussion about diversity, this hidden superpower that's hiding within your company. So let me introduce the people we've got on the panel and who they are and what they do. So Sherry, who we've already said hi to. Sherry is the CEO of Spencer Pest and also the president of the Pest Control Business Coach, a consulting organization that helps pest control companies rise to their fullest potential. Did I frame that up properly, Sherry?
Yeah, except I'm no longer the CEO of Spencer Pest.
That's right. You are. That is correct.
So I was the CEO of Spencer Pest. My daughter has now replaced me in that position.
But I think all the years of experience still come along with you, though.
Oh, yeah. 31, almost 32.
Carl Braun, owner of Quality Pest Control and also on the board of directors for the National Pest Management Association. Carl, did I frame you up correctly? Did I get everything about you that I think is relatively salient to this conversation?
Yeah, you did a good job, Vinay, and I'm glad to be here.
And Michael is COO and managing partner of Satterman Connect. Michael, you've been doing consulting in and around the HR space for some time as Satterman Connect, correct?
Yeah, Satterman Connect has been focused on growing talent and evolving culture for a number of years. And I'm excited to hear how the pest control environment is shaping up in that space.
So I'd like to start out first by doing a little bit of housekeeping. And for anybody who's listening in on live, I'd like to make this an interactive discussion. While I think there's plenty for us to talk about, and we're going to be going through some data and some visualizations to kind of see how we can use information, how we can change our leadership, especially around this topic of diversity. Type something in the comments and tell us if you've got questions, you disagree, agree. I would love to hear it, and I think it'll kind of shape our conversation. But I want to start off first with this idea of diversity. I feel like there's 1,000 different definitions of what diversity could be. And I'd maybe like to start, maybe Michael, with you. Diversity. Give me an understanding of what you see diversity and what is the impact on a company by understanding diversity?
You know, I really appreciate the question. And I find that many use the word diversity, perhaps a little bit incorrectly. For me, diversity is a fact. When you have two people in a room, in a conversation, in any way, you will automatically have diversity, even if they're both straight, cisgender white men, there will be a degree of diversity by their lived experiences, their backgrounds, socioeconomic, social, whatever it may be. And so I think that what many are talking about when they start broaching the idea of diversity is really an idea of perhaps equity or inclusion, and that ability to speak openly, candidly, bring those experiences and point of view to bear. And therein lies the power and opportunity. Where can ideas be brought to the table coming from different points of view?
So Sherry, let's kind of jump off that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Having been in the industry for some time, there's a number of people who've kind of rolled into the doors into your company over a number of years.
Oh, just a few.
Yeah, just a couple. They all bring some level of talent or some capacity. Do you see that the same way? This diversity is kind of a fact. It's really kind of leveraging some of those talents that people bring in the door that really allows them to kind of take the organization to the next level. Is that a fair way to ask that question?
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with Michael, because to me, we all come from different backgrounds. We were all raised differently. We all have different beliefs. We all came from different home cultures, I'm going to call it. Now you're going into a business culture that we're trying to, grow our people in, and having a way to collect those ideas, have those conversations with people, not just, what are they experiencing in the field from their customers? Because the bigger we get, we don't necessarily have that interaction directly with the customer when we're in upper level management, as well as, so our service techs are having those conversations with customers and getting feedback. Our customer service support team who's answering the phone is getting that. Our salespeople are getting that. And as leaders, owners, managers, we need to have what's going on with our customers. What are our customers looking for? And then who in our teams have the talents that may have they need to be uncovered. Like we didn't even know they had those talents that we could take advantage of. Because when we have people working in their strengths, it's such an advantage to our companies.
I talk about this idea of Superman or Superwoman about to open their shirt, right? Most people have their shirt on, and it's time to start to see the Superman symbol or Superwoman symbol underneath. Carl, I'd love your input. You, as being on part of the NPMA board, you see a lot of diversity in terms of companies themselves, but even in running your own company. Talk to me about, from your perspective, what is diversity? I mean, do you feel like it's understood well enough, and the power of it is understood?
Boy, that's a very good question. I'm glad that you asked that. First of all, I just wanted to point out, I was happy to hear what Michael said about diversity, because this is a conversation we had just this morning. It's when people mention diversity, certain things come to mind as kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and diversity is so much more than the obvious. And Sherry, I liked how you said, be able to tap into the diversity of strengths and match people up where they need to be. Now, in my own company, I am a fairly diverse. I have a fairly diverse company, but it's diversity in different ways. Not necessarily in sexual preference or whatnot. Not that there's any prejudice or bias. It just hasn't worked out. What we want is the best person for the job. From the NPMA perspective, there is quite a diversity in the companies that are present, and I think that's a good thing. In fact, that's a real good thing. It brings up, well, I feel like that's probably why I'm on the board, is to add a little bit of diversity. I mean, I'm a smaller company in the Midwest. I'm not one of these companies that has 100 employees on either coast. So anyway, once you get me started, Danae, you might not get a word in edgewise, so I'll breathe for a minute.
That's all right. I think this is all about having the dialogue, and I encourage anybody who's listening in. I'd love to hear where you're connecting in from. I think we've got Atlanta. I think we've got Michael. You're up in New York, and Carl, you're out in Oklahoma.
No,
I'd love to hear from anybody. I'm sorry.
I'm in Nebraska. I'm sorry.
I said Oklahoma, Nebraska. I'm getting all my notes wrong here.
Yeah.
but I would love to hear anybody who's listening in where you're connecting in from, what city you're connecting from. I'd love to find out. Just I think it would be nice to see how diverse our crowd is.
Vinay, can I make a comment about something? So
Please.
I sat on MPMA's board twice in the past 30 years, and we actually created a diversity committee on MPMA's board when one of the years I sat on it. And Marillion Masidi was the one who actually initially chaired the founding for that. And she will be next year's president of MPMA. So that's pretty exciting. And I know when it was originally formed, a lot of people in the industry thought, let's just be real here. Pest control was a man's world, and pest control, is the man's club, and just bringing women in made it diverse, regardless of all of our social backgrounds and stuff. But the way so many people think about diversity is purely whether it's gender, race, ethnicity is what first comes to most people's mind. And being that boys club or that men's club that pest control was forever, I think that we've come a tremendous way. We've now had females be president. We've all different races, ethnicities have been a part of MPMA's boards, MPMA's committees, and not just through our individual organizations as pest control companies, but which we're all getting more diverse as well with regards to just those standard things most people talk about. But the industry itself, there's still companies out there that run as the boys club or the men's club, and there's still some of that happening out there within the industry. I think it's gotten 100% better, but I think we have a long way to go as well. Just as an industry itself, as a female in the industry, there are challenges that we face as females by being part of that men's club and trying to break our way in. I will tell you, I've had wonderful mentors within this industry that were male and that were great, but there is a lot of prejudice to just gender relations, let alone let's go to the whole, ethnicity, race, and then go to whether or not, the whole gender type issues as well with gays and all the things that are out there in the world today. And there's a lot there in the world, let alone and the same things are happening within the industry.
So Dr. Tim Merrick put a comment in here, and I encourage people to. So thank you for doing that, Dr. Merrick. Tim, good to see you. So his comment was, my anecdotal experience is that diversity conversation started defensively. We need to make room for everyone, but the conversation has evolved to the opportunity of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that. I feel like it's money, it's potential, it's production, it's profitability that's left on the table. It's not a check mark. Is that
definitely not a check mark?
Carl, were you about to say something?
Well, I have a question for Sherry. As a current member, as currently sitting on the board, I see it as a welcome, arms wide open. We welcome anybody who's interested. Recently, we were all part of a survey, a third-party survey, and my comments are, I feel like the want to is there. I mean, we want to be diverse. I think the shortcoming, if there is a shortcoming, is breaking down those barriers that aren't even our barriers. I mean, people, well, you mentioned the good old boys club. I mean, there still is that, and sadly to admit, there's a lot of that in my state, but there's also not a lot of that. However, if people think it's that, I mean, our opportunity is to be able to communicate that we are, a welcoming industry, if that makes any sense at all.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you on that, because I think we've come a very long way, and totally agree with it.
Michael, I'm kind of curious what you're thinking. I got to imagine there's wheels turning in your mind.
Of course.
Very much so. So I have the intersection of 20 years of strategy and communications, as well as human resources. And Sherry, based upon what you were sharing of, in essence, breaking down the barriers of the old boys club, I keep reflecting on who you serve. In pest control, you are in many ways walking into people's businesses, but more often their homes.
Yeah.
And the question I would often ask those who think that people who are not like them shouldn't be part of the business. When you knock on the door of that customer, who are you likely to meet? My guess is you're likely to meet the woman who's managing the home, whether from a traditional reason or some other reason. Even with dual incomes, the decision about when a customer service representative should show up in a home is most often made by a woman.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the customers as a whole, we're currently at the precipice of, I think it's, if you look merely at race, 49-ish% of all America is non-white, non-Caucasian. So if you're going to knock on someone's door and you are a white man, odds are you will meet someone who is not on the surface like you. And if you approach that from the standpoint of thinking of them as less than, that they can't be your competitor or counterpart, how could they be your customer?
Exactly. Well, and because of those different backgrounds, we bring a different perspective. So, and it's been a huge topic. How do we recruit more women to the industry? More so than the different ethnicities, right? But how do you recruit more women to the industry? And a lot of it is bugs are icky, right? So women must to necessarily deal with that, but it's such a phenomenal industry that there are other ways you can be involved in the industry without actually going out and servicing bugs. But there's a lot of women out there who do service, and women make amazing technicians because they're greeting that woman at the door. Women often provide better customer service, or because they're the one making those decisions. They have insights on how they would want that service to be presented to them, or how that person should come knock on their door or make that phone call. So it's just different perspectives as and it's great to get those conversations going, right?
Certainly. Well, and in meeting customers where they are, there's the opportunity to recognize within a business culture where and how the workforce, the workplace, and the marketplace all intersect. Sure. And if you can appreciate that when you're knocking on someone's, take it even at a surface level. If you were to knock on someone's door and you are a white man, and the person who answers the door is a white man, it doesn't mean you're going to have an instant bond or connection. That man may be covering for the fact that he has a sibling that has autism and has a certain degree of appreciation of disability in the United States. Sure. Or they may be from a family of divorce, which is becoming a large portion, if not the majority of Americans, and therefore may not appreciate some of the comments you may make about your spouse or your wife. So understanding where that other individual is as a coworker is, I think, the first step in being a successful business person.
Oh, sure. More men are staying home and being house husbands than the women are staying home too. So, there's a lot of change and diversity happening in society in general, because we're changing roles, there's all kinds of stuff happening. So yeah, to that point, exactly.
I want to share another comment here from Tim Merrick. Many companies will welcome diversity passively. Is there a benefit of actively seeking employees, board members, etc., who represent diverse lived experiences? Michael, I'll start with you. I mean, you've got a broad reach in terms of industries. How would you respond to this?
100% yes. The opportunity to diversify a board creates opportunity. And there's been conversation as of late talking about a skills gap, which I wouldn't agree 100%. It's not about skills. It's about aligning want and need. If an organization is looking for technicians and has 10 jobs in that space, and there are 100 technicians vying for that role, it's not a skills gap. It's where the wants of the organization aren't aligning with the needs of employees. To a board, if you're trying to drive your business forward and figure out where you need to be a year, 5 years from now, who better than a diverse slate of thinkers with diverse experiences to help guide you as a leader to where you could be? How far down the road is that target? And how are things going to be different from what they are today?
Sure.
So here's something I'd like to suggest. For anybody who's listening in, there's some data and analytics that I'd like to bring up on screen here. And the reason why is it's easier. I mean, I tell people I love physics in school, and they could draw on a chalkboard because they didn't have whiteboards when I went to school. On the chalkboard, they would, draw the, two billiard balls crashing together so you could do the physics problem. But when I actually saw it, it meant a whole heck of a lot more to me.
Sure.
So I'd like to bring up some visuals here that we can all look at together. And I'd love to see how we can see diversity in a company in terms of different people and how there's that super power that's hidden within. Is that a fair place for us to go?
Sounds good.
All right, let me share my screen here, and then we will. Can you all see what I have on screen here?
Mm-hmm.
So I've brought up, and let me walk everyone through this just so they have a general understanding of what we're looking at here. What we've done is we've got this technician who's been at the company for 6 years. And just so you all can see what's happening here, we've mapped out the performance of that individual. So let's think of a test that you did in school. You get 0 to 100. 100 is on the outer edge, and a 0 is in the middle. There's a green dotted line here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so you all can see it a little better. But the 100 is on the outside edge. The green line is like a B or better, so you've done an 80 or better on the tests. This is the average, the black line. This is kind of what is accepted. And the red line is what I'll call the low performer. They got a 20 or less on the test. This blue area is how JT has performed in this role compared to others. Now, if I looked at just how long they were working their day or how many stops they made, and these metrics can change per company. But if I look at a singular dimension, I may say, JT is not a great person for me. But I can look at average distance between stops. This route is actually something that they're managing quite well. Carl, Sherry, Michael, I'd love to see, when you look at something like this, how as a leader do you see this? Do you see this as, oh my gosh, I got to get this person out the door? Or what goes through your mind as you see something like this?
Sherry, go ahead.
Well,
ladies first, right?
First of all, this. So for me, I would think that this individual might need some driver training based on their safe braking and safe accelerating. And they seem to spend a lot of time in their car idling. So maybe they're sitting on their phone. So I might go look at their phone bill and figure out what's going on there, because that's an awful lot of thing. But why are they, if their average distance between stops is small, which is one of the challenges, is getting that density in order to maximize how many stops we can do a day, then the average stops per day should be right up there with it, if not even higher. Because so what's going on here? Like, are they doing big accounts and that's why those two numbers are coming off? Or is it a commercial route where they're doing longer stops? Or is it because they're sitting in the truck idling for so long that they're not getting stops done? So it's a very unproductive employee. So like, what does that look like? But the number of hours they're in that vehicle per day is very low. So my initial thing would be, this is a commercial route tech who is doing very few stops. That's why the distance is coming out great. And the idle time, they're probably taking breaks in the truck in between because it's a big warehouse or something like that. That would be how I would look at it.
So let me distill a little bit of what I'm hearing from you, is just this idea that there's probably a lot more questions that need to be asked first before we kind of jump to a conclusion here, right? Yeah. and there may be some things that they're doing really well that needs to be teased out. They may just not know necessarily what that path to success or is kind of how they're being measured. So it may not be so much that they're doing something wrong, because I feel like black and whites really don't exist in the world of adults. It's usually shades of gray. But there's something that could potentially be teased out of this employee if we kind of coach them along that right pathway. Carl, do you see that as well?
I absolutely see that. And again, lots more questions. This is what it is. but it does bring to mind a whole litany of more questions to find out what's going on. And this tool is relatively new to me, and we've talked a little bit about it, and I'm quite intrigued by how well, the data comes alive. First it's just data, then it becomes something more, and then from that ultimately you gain wisdom, right? So anyway, this helps in that middle spot.
Yeah, and the idea of being able to understand sort of that behavior of that individual kind of gives more dimensionality as to what is happening, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring up another graph here just so we can do a little bit of compare and contrast. We saw sort of, I'll call it this almond shape for JT. Let's look at another technician here, in this another person in this role, completely different. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So Sam has been in this role for 4 years. You can kind of see that almond shape has now changed. Michael, I'm going to kind of go with you next here. We see a difference in the behaviors of these individuals. So we're now starting to talk about, we're really kind of starting to see evidence of this diversity in an organization. What goes through your mind as you see this?
So I probably don't speak pest very well, and probably don't know what these roles consist of. But I am curious, if we look at JT, Sam, and others, and where some of them may be over-indexing on their responsibilities, where can we take these huge differences and possibly create a committee of conversation, talking about the diversity of experiences they're having out in the field, and how some may be solving problems differently and or better than others, where they can come up with ways of approaching the business as a whole to help the organization grow and just be more efficient.
So when I appreciate that, and looking here at this particular individual, Sam, in this case, we see that if you look at this black line here, that's kind of shows you what is the average for the company. That's what the average person in that role is doing. So places where Sam is doing better than average are these stops made or the stops per day. There are some places that they actually have some domain expertise or knowledge in that organization. So creating these teams or centers of excellence, Sam might have some value in teaching others in the organization how to do that. What happens when you bring people forward? Have you all seen results that actually increases retention or engagement, productivity of those employees?
Oh, absolutely. The more you involve an employee in decision making and make them feel like their opinion matters, I think you end up getting them more engaged into the company because they feel like they matter. They're more than just an employee who's there to collect a paycheck at that point, because you're getting feedback from them. How did you do that? Why are your numbers always good? How are you a top performer regularly? What do you do that's different? How can we, what things do we need to work on when training other employees or things like that to make sure that, or maybe you should be part of the training, so how is that identified as to where that goes and what that looks like?
I'll introduce, one last person here, and I kind of saved this one for last because you can kind of see that this person is excelling. Pat, in this case, is starting to really excel in a number of different areas. To me, it seems like there is somebody who has got lots of knowledge within the organization and can be a fantastic counselor and or coach for others. Again, bringing them to the front of the room at team meetings seems like that'll unlock a whole bunch of capability just because they're different in how they approach their role. Carl, any thoughts about that yourself?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking the same thing. It's clear that this guy has it figured out as far as how to run his routes efficiently. And plus he gets a little help, perhaps. I don't know if he does his own dispatch, but there's some help that way too, as far as efficiencies there. But yeah, having that person lead the team meeting, or at least be a contributor, again, it helps with buy-in. Not with him, or not just with them, but with everyone. everyone matters. Does that make sense?
I think so. Sherry, what do you think in terms of trying to bring these people forward and trying to get them to coach each other? I mean, I'll tell you, as a leader of a company myself, oftentimes I don't want the burden of progress to always be on my shoulders. There's a way to divest some of that so that I'm not the one staying up late at night saying, how am I going to make this happen again?
Oh, absolutely. Because we can't, I mean, that's why we are leaders and we need to be working on what we're really good at and using the strengths of others for what they're really good at. And somebody in this case, I mean, you've got a good driver here who drives well. Why is he a good driver versus the others who had a lot of hard breakings and unsafe excels? So what's going on there? What training can he provide? He's running his route really efficient. But the idle time sticks out on all three of them. So as a leader or owner, I'd be looking at that going, why do we have excessive idle time? What is it in our overall process that's creating that, so that we could figure out how to, because the more a vehicle idles, what is it? 1 hour of idling equals a gallon of gas. Well, with the price of gas right now, I don't want anybody idling, right? So what does that look like? And what is that costing us? And how can we fix that? And I don't know how to fix it. I'd have to go to my service guys and figure out what is it we're doing that's creating that excessive idle time.
So I'm going to stop sharing this, and if anybody would like the slides, I'd be more than happy to send these out to you so you can take a look at them at your own leisure. But even with cost of insurance or really just trying to run operations and profitability as a company, lots of times instead of me trying to find the answer, I'm more interested in asking the right questions of people. Michael, it sounds like you're about to say something.
I do have a question because I was trying to read the chart and understand it within your industry. So if the idle time for any of them was more towards the outside, meaning they were idling less.
That's how I would read it.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So Pat was idling more. I would be curious from the standpoint of customer engagement, finding an employee who idles less than everyone else. What is the secret to the relationships that they have with their customers that allows them to get in and out fastest? And what can you learn from that model that others can emulate across the organization? Maybe Pat has a real understanding of his customer and knows like the three things that matter most to them. So they can make a comment about sports for person X and cooking for person Y, create that emotional bonded connection and be welcomed in, do their job, take care of the pests and move on. Like I that's where my brain starts to go in regards to engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of coming back to that whole diversity of hiring piece, right? I mean, some people might just come in and start talking about the family, and that's really all that matters to the people that you're talking to on the other side of the door, right? On the other side of the doorway. And that's where the relationship is built from. And that's an opportunity to correlate some of those data points to say, that's the person I need to bring to the front and teach us all what best practices in our organization should be, right?
Right. And there's also the other part of it, which is for those who may be idling more, it may not be anything bad about the relationship. It may be the way in which they're engaging people. So when you understand their strengths, if like we do a lot of assessments in our organization, and some may think of assessments like DISC or Hogan or Gallup strengths. And if you look at an employee who may be, for example, really high in wooing, so they're all about creating that moment of winning others over, they may be over-indexing in idle time because they're having too much conversation.
Well, in our case, idle time means the truck's running and they're sitting in it.
Got it.
So that's unproductive time. So that means they're sitting on their phone talking to their wife, their partner, whatever, or they're texting, or they're reading emails, or playing a game, or whatever. I would look at that, and they're not serving the customer, or they left their truck running because it's 95 degrees out and they don't want to get back into a hot vehicle at the end of that particular service. So they leave their truck running so the vehicle's cool, but that's costing me a gallon of gas an hour. And so that's a problem. So that's how Okay.
So,
Okay, so opposite of engagement, because they certainly aren't on the phone with the customer having a great, good bonding conversation would be my guess. And so that would be something we would want to figure out as to why that's going on. And these data numbers in our industry are so important because the most dangerous thing we do is drive. We put our people in vehicles every day, and it's the most dangerous thing we do. And having safety around that is huge, and that's why that braking and Excel numbers are so important. The idle time is important because it's wear and tear on our vehicles, and again, it's unproductive time. And then being able to maximize our numbers. I mean, these are all good numbers, and managing by the numbers in general, and there's more numbers to manage by, is huge because the numbers tell a story. And I love the fact that Vinay graphs these out because it's so visual, and it immediately kind of shows the three and how different they were. But to me, the fact that all three had an idle issue means I have a problem as a company where my people are sitting in their vehicles too long, idling, and what's going on there, that I've now got to start including my team members to figure out a solution to that problem.
Carl,
So-
I feel like you got a burning comment to add here.
I do. One of the things that I try to do because of the way I'm wired is I'm quick to see something maybe a little darker than what it is. So I'm making myself, in this case, assume positive intent. So, I mean, another thing they could be doing while they're idling is completing their documentation. Or they could be, in my business, we're mostly residential. They could be calling ahead to their next clients. They could be following up on that person who said, I don't know, can you call me tomorrow? For me, that idle is, let's ask some more questions.
Sure.
And then there's always the part of me that says, come on, turn off the air conditioner, get out and work too.
Well, and then my question on that would be, hey, Vinay, when you're tracking this as an average, are you including all the stuff Carl said in that data as to be an average? So if they were doing all the tasks that Carl says, which we do expect of all of our people, would it hit the average point or would it hit the below average point?
Interesting point.
Yeah, no. So it's
what's
it's a
it
fantastic. It's a fantastic question, right? I mean, and I think I found this about myself. As soon as I like to think I know the answer, it's about time for me to start challenging myself and saying, "Am I asking the right questions?" And I believe what we have as an opportunity here is, as we start to see this, like you said, everyone's got idling. I've got about 3 or 4 questions. Are we monitoring the right things? Am I looking in the right direction and asking the right questions? Because that's what prevents me from being a really effective leader, is whether I'm asking. I can have the wrong question and get the right answer to the wrong question. Doesn't mean I'm getting anywhere.
Well, and do I have the right benchmark? Like, could the benchmark itself could be wrong? Like, I could have
Solid point,
not
right?
allowed. So to me, a technician should be idling at least 5 minutes after each stop to do the paperwork, call the next account, respond to any office messages, 5 to 10 minutes max per account. So is that benchmark set at 5 or 10 minutes, or is that benchmark set at 1? So now I'm getting bad scores, or is that benchmark set at 20? So now I'm looking better, so it's all in getting the benchmark right too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think what I'm hearing here, distilling that, is what I'll say, this diversity of people in your organization give you a better insight as to whether you're using the right measuring stick or not. Right? Because if you're not measuring all those data points, I might be looking at the wrong thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. And if I just
true.
ask one person what that time should be, it could be the wrong person. So I want to ask a group. I want to include people and then come up with what makes sense, right? So I'm getting all points of what it could be and what's the best solution. Let's talk it through.
Michael, talk to me about this idea of that measuring stick. I mean, I feel like lots of times when I talk to people, I've heard this old phrase that people join a company because of the vision, they leave because of management. Yet they go to the next company that they start and they use the same exact metrics and KPIs and measurements that they learned at the last place, which is exactly why they left. This diversity, have you seen it give people pause to where they start to say, I need a new set of lenses in what I'm doing here. Have you seen that occur?
I think that what we'll often find, because we'll do culture audits at organizations, small and large, is sort of a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data. What are the metrics, just like you've outlined? What are the metrics that matter? But then what are the reasons that those issues matter? So for an employee going from one organization to the next, yes, salary likely matters. The ability to not work extra hours so they can go home to whatever family life they may have, but also opportunities for growth. Is there a desire to eventually become a manager, or I just want to be the best technician I can? Let me run that show and go home to whatever I go home to. So I think understanding what they're really valuing and aligning your corporate culture to the space for those values to matter is an opportunity for an organization, an opportunity for diversity. When you're a purpose-driven and a passion-driven organization, finding out what those understanding what those passions are and the behaviors that you'll allow give you an opportunity to find like-minded like-minded workforce that can help enhance the culture you're trying to live and breathe. It's important to always think about a culture addition, not a culture fit, because where you are today may not be where you as an organization need to be tomorrow.
So I'm hearing birds of a feather flock together, right? So if you start to be intentional in the way that you're running the organization, with the way you're thinking, and you start to share that and understand, empathize, to use that word, in that conversation with people, you start to actually add them to that cultural mix as opposed to kind of keeping them on the fringes of it. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I'm always surprised when people are like, just show up and work. They're not automatons. They're not machines. And even if they are machines, they all have their own moments. Treating someone as less than human when they show up for a job and forgetting that, what were they clocking out of at 7:59 this morning? What was their experience that they're coming into? Are they having their own rough day? Are they having some other kind of family crisis? Understanding that gives you as a business owner an opportunity to really bring out the best in every team member. And I think there's something worth merit.
So I always often like to think in terms of athletics analogies or sports teams, because I've played so many sports in my life. When I played soccer or played basketball, right, there are things that I do really well, and it's the job of the coach to figure out what I do really well and where, hey, it's time to put Vinay in or take Vinay out, because in response to the other team or response to the situation in the game, putting the right players in place and leveraging their talents to the maximum is the best way to build that team, especially when the other team members know how to use them better.
Absolutely.
I think that's the analogy that I'm hearing here, right?
Mm-hmm. Not everyone needs to be the same. To solve the job, where are those different perspectives going to see the issue from a different angle? And leveraging someone's strength, that if someone's strength is being really strategic in mapping out what's the ideal route for each one of our technicians, while another person is really hyper focused on the details of what's that experience, and are we making sure we're mapping the journey to fit within those details, gives you as an organization an opportunity to just see it from a mixed point of view and really see things in 360.
Carl, talk to me. I mean, you as in terms of seeing some of that data and some of the analytics, by being able to understand some of these different strengths of individuals, do you feel like that gives you more visibility into creating that intentionality in your organization, being able to find that roadmap to your own success as a leader?
Without a doubt. Excuse me. Without a doubt, it does provide that insight. I think that we have to be mindful of whatever unconscious bias that we may have that blocks us from being able to see the light. But yeah, I mean, it's by having a strong, diverse team, you can't lose.
Sherry, any thoughts from your side?
Oh, totally. So we actually use an assessment called Colby, which is tests the cognitive part of the brain, which is how you do things. And if you don't have a diverse group of just Colby scores within your organization, it can prevent you from actually, being successful because, and they actually have reports that tell you the synergy amongst your team members based on this diversity. And what it taught us just from a simple assessment like that was who to have in the room when you're brainstorming. There's certain people you don't have in the room because you send them into having hives and anxiety attacks because they aren't wired to handle brainstorming. And who are your task rabbits and who are your researchers and who are the people who build things and how do you fit them? And by having people work in their natural strengths, then you now have people, it's not work, it's fun because I'm naturally doing something that I was wired to do at birth. And so it's the scores are based on data, but again, it brings a diverse thing into your organization through that, assessment. And it was a game changer for us for hiring to utilize something like that. But it also became a game changer for us in brainstorming, decision making, who's heading up what team, who do we involve with what because of their strengths and stuff. And I think that, in Good to Great, they said you get the right people on the right seats of the bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is culture. You got to have a good culture fit. And then you got to get them on the right seat in the right seat of the bus. And different assessments help with this, but it's all data. It's all data driven. And then we're going to hold them accountable based on data. Because if you don't inspect what you expect, and how do you do that with data? So it all kind of, and all that data helps you make those decisions by including the right people in the right conversations, but also getting opinions from the right people who give you the true story of what's going on in the background.
Carl.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, being a scientist first, there's this concept of statistical significance. So my question to Sherry, I'm just curious, you have a luxury that I don't, in that you apparently have a pool of people that you can pick to get the right people in the right seats. Just how many people are on your leadership team? I'm curious. I mean, I don't have that luxury. I'm a small business.
So I started out small,
Mm-hmm.
And when I had my pest control company, there were 4 of us on the main leadership team. But, with different technicians, but I now coach other pest control companies. And so some of my coaching clients there's 4 of them, but we still have to make some of those same decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of this industry too is there's a lot of mentors out there. There's a lot of groups. There are some mastermind groups. Being involved in NPMA is huge because of the relationships you build by being involved in NPMA, and the people you meet and having those people to ask questions and what are they seeing in their business. This industry is incredible about sharing, which my husband's in a totally different industry. And he's like, oh my God, the stuff you share with each other is amazing. We would never, kind of thing. So we're really blessed to be in the industry that we're in because we do share and stuff, but there are resources out there, and there are, getting involved in a group and being able to bounce ideas off other people as to what they're experiencing and what those things look like is huge. Because it's lonely in a little business, and we don't know what we don't know. And we can learn from these bigger companies. And there's a lot of people out there loving to help others, which is why I started coaching. I just loved helping others and saw a real hole there in our industry where there aren't people to help us. And so many people are afraid to call their competitor or call somebody else in the industry, and everybody loves to share what they do well.
Yeah, well, you make some solid points about being involved with NPMA, and you won't get any argument from me. And it's those relationships that have been foundational in getting me where I am with my own business. I mean, this isn't my first rodeo, but it's my first pest control rodeo for sure. And it is lonely at the top. You're 100% certain. I mean, I agree with that completely. So yeah, I mean, peer groups and whatnot, they're great. I'm just in my own little shell of my company. You know, I mean, we all have big heads, but there's still more hats than can fit on those heads.
Sure.
You know, and so the secret sauce is you just figure out how to make it work as best you can, and you know, one step at a time, and then you get to the next hurdle and you solve that. You know, so easy enough. Go ahead, Denai.
Yeah, so we've got a couple more minutes here, and I kind of wanted to go around the table here, if you will, the virtual table, and kind of touch back on this point, and maybe from each one of you have got a perspective on this, and maybe how someone can start to embrace this diversity. I mean, from my point of view, it's all I do is take a look at the data and start to say, here's what's happening, so that you can now you have the ability to shift your perspective and maybe look at things from a positive point of view, as in maybe they're filling out those tickets or filling out the notes after they're visiting a customer. Sherry, you help pest control companies, you help these small businesses start their $1 million climb, as you call it. How do you see this whole idea of diversity filling into that $1 million climb? I'd love to hear your thoughts and maybe where someone starts.
Well, the biggest thing is changing the thinking about, you know, what business owners are thinking. So whether they're hitting their first million, their second, or their fifth million, we all have challenges because there's different things that come ahead of us as we hit all of those, you know, achievements. We've hit our first million, great. Now we have these problems. We've hit our second, great. Now we have these problems, type of stuff. So being able to, one, identify that, understand what those flags are and stuff, but talking to our people, including our people know what's going on. Our people have great ideas. Including them, talking to them, meeting with them one-on-one, at least on an annual basis, and asking them what they see is not working, what's working, how we could improve it, how we could streamline it, what seems to not be running, you know, as easy as it could. So many people don't like change, but a lot of people prefer improvement. You know, like, this drives me crazy when I have to do this. Okay, well, is that really necessary that we have to do that anymore? Do we really have to do that if it's driving everybody crazy? Having exit interviews with people when they leave you as to why they left. You know, we can't improve what we don't know. We can't fix what we don't know is wrong. So asking questions, having those conversations, and having very thick skin, because you may not like what you hear, but you need to take it in and really look at it and not take it personal. It's business. And we all have really bad processes in our business, and we all have really great processes in our business. And how do we maximize those great things and improve the things that aren't good, so that we can run more efficiently, satisfy our people, which are our number one customer, and then satisfy our customers.
Michael, you come into companies, you help them build this culture. I mean, this old saying is that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Building the right culture is so incredibly important. Takeaway points from what we discussed today, and this ability to see different strengths amongst individuals and maybe even trends amongst them all. What are your takeaway points here? What do you think people should jot down on their notes and think about?
Well, I think in many ways, when Sherry just summarized her point of view, it made me reflect upon two very important aspects. One is your role as a leader. How are you acting as an inclusive leader? Being open to the questions, being growth mindset. And that is a critical skill that not every organization nor every leader has in place. Even if you're a small group of 4 people, there's still someone making decisions, and being open to asking the question. To Sherry's point about feedback to us is a gift. You have to be able to ask the question and quite candidly, shut up and listen to the answer. Even if it's not well framed, it is probably speaking, hopefully honestly and candidly. And because talent is such a hard thing to mesh with your own culture, recruiting, engaging, and retaining that talent to ensure that there's a history there. When you have an employee who's been there multiple years, they're going to have some degree of reflection. And when you keep having a high degree of turnover, there's going to be no history. They're not going to know, well, when I ran this route last spring, here's what I encountered and here's how it felt different. So that idea of being an inclusive leader and understanding your own leadership style is paramount. Finding a coach or finding someone you can speak to outside of your own space will help you just think differently and ask those right questions and know when you need to tell someone what to do, teach them how to do something better, or coach them into solving their problems differently when they're out in the field.
Agreed. Carl, how about yourself? Any closing thoughts or ideas, or what should be take-home nuggets?
Well,
Who's been listening?
Yeah, one thing that's well, there's a few take-home nuggets. Sherry and Michael did a great job with their summaries. Something that's come up multiple times throughout our meeting today is asking questions, and you know, it's good leaders ask great questions, right? Thank you, John Maxwell. But anyway, it's true. You know, it's asking the right question, and I think that's, and then listen. You know. Michael said it well. The response may not be framed very like you want to hear it in the best way, but listen, it's a response nonetheless. You mentioned also having a growth mindset, Michael. That happens to be our first core value, is having a growth mindset. And once it's there, you can't just rest on your laurels. I mean, it has to be, you know, it is part of, I mean, core values are part of culture, and we just can't get complacent. And you know, in general, I learned basically everything I ever needed to know in life from Clint Eastwood movies and rock and roll music. And the Clint Eastwood reference is a man's got to know his limitations, and you know, Dirty Harry if you're a fan, but the man's got to know his limitations, and it's definitely okay to get smart people around you that can do a better job. You know, if you're the smartest guy in the room, find a new room, right? That's the expression. So anyway, my takeaway, my suggestions are ask the right questions, listen, and don't get complacent.
Well, for anybody who's been listening in, whether it's right now or in the replays, thank you for taking some time to listen. Hopefully there was some really interesting nuggets. I think it seems like we all came to some agreement about the idea of asking questions and being able to use that diversity as the power. Sherry, I highly recommend that you reach out to Sherry if you have any questions about how to grow your business. That's what she does. I've always loved my conversations with her, always insightful, always walk away with having learned something.
Thanks.
Same thing with Michael. Whenever I talk about culture, I want to learn something about culture. I'm learning definitions from him that I just had never thought about before. I recommend that you reach out to Michael if culture is where you're looking. And also, Carl has been a fantastic resource for me. Well networked, just candid in the way he talks. Fantastic sounding board. So I'd love to connect you with any one of them if you need those connections, and if you have any interest in being able to see the data in your company, feel free to reach out to me. But Michael, Sherry, Carl, thank you for spending some time with us.
Thanks,
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.